Hi everyone. It's me again, Rachel May. Going to address another subject that's of interest to quite a number of you. And thank you, Christy, for asking me to talk on this subject and bring through some information. The subject is reincarnation. I will touch on karma. And where I work with reincarnation is mainly to do with issues because when I work with people, most of the people I deal with, the people who come and work with me, they're starseeds and light workers, they're healers, some are artists, writers, whatever, but basically they're healers. So it's not so much a matter of karma as a matter of issues from experiences in previous lives, or even sometimes in other dimensions, which can be some stuck energy that's been hanging around for a long time. And what I see is that, those of us on the path of light, if we had any karma, it's been cleared, and mainly it's actually been a matter of issues. I'm not saying that most of us have had absolutely zero karma, but I don't really see very heavy karmas in the going back in time for the starseeds and so on. I know I've heard about it, but for some reason the people that show up and ask me to do readings don't manifest that, and I have been doing readings for a really long time now. So reincarnation is a fact. You probably... If you're listening to this, you almost certainly have some feeling or idea about it. You may remember some of your past lives. If you have a very affectionate feeling for a certain historical period, you would normally, or if I looked at your past lives, I would see that you lived in that time. Personally, I had bad experiences with the Spanish Inquisition, and I know that I don't know how I'd be now, but I never wanted to go to Spain. And I had weird experiences in France too when I went to France. And I know that I did end up begging on the streets and starving in the French Revolution, as so many did at that time. I didn't feel freaked out there, but it was very strange. I was attracting the attention of weird people, quite often weird men, every time I went. And I always had very, affectionate feelings about North America, and a lot about South America too. But now I live here and have done for a long time. It's obvious to me, how many times I've lived here. And in the places where I've ended up living in the West and the Southwest, I lived there before, and I don't have sort of very clear memories for the most part. I do have some memories. For example, I was the cousin of Geronimo. Somebody told me that in Sedona, a man who told me he was the reincarnation of Geronimo. I think he probably was. He was a very amazing person. He had sort of a ton of life force energy, and he was very interesting. He was also extremely nice, but he said, "Oh, you were my cousin." And I do remember, they were always hiding Geronimo and his army, and I used to go and visit them. Cousins are a very strong thing in Native American families, stronger than siblings. And I do remember being shot by an arrow, or saw myself being killed by an animal arrow. I was male in that life. Most of us on this planet have had numerous lives on this planet. I work with a few people who've not. They've, had a few lives. They're more here to bring certain things into the planet, to bring their light and their teachings from somewhere else. And they often move through life passages more easily because they have fewer issues with the planet. The rest of us, we're not so much clearing karma from past lives, but we, tend to have quite a few issues from previous lives, and the starseeds do anyway. I also do work with some people who don't have a lot of issues, and you often find that, they may not be quite so strong. They're not here to do great healing work or great spiritual teaching work. They might be here to have certain experiences and raise a family, and then some of them do go on to study healing modalities, and but some starseeds have a heavier load than others, and mostly it's from things that have happened to them rather than things they've done to others, although it can be that too. So one thing I do find about past lives is it's a marvelous key. If you remember, or some people get, hypnosis, and they go back into past lives, and what usually happens then is they relive something that needs to be released, or it's something that's very key in their psyche now. When I go back into the past lives of people I work with, I see the things that I'm taken and shown, things that they are able to clear and heal at this time, at the time around the time I'm doing the session, and they don't have to relive the event, and some of them are very traumatic. And I do think there's a place for past life regression, but I don't really do it. Usually the things I talk about, the person, it resonates with them. I also do past lives with pets and animals, which, if you're very close to an animal, they will keep coming back into your life, and they may have been in your life for many lifetimes. They may have also been in your life before you came here on other planets. There are planets where cats have wings and they fly, for example, and sometimes somebody has a cat that's very close to them and they were in that other place or one of those places, and the cat once had wings. Dogs, again, if you are very close to an animal, it saddens me when people, lose a beloved pet and they're grief-stricken. I'm always on Facebook saying they'll come back, because they do, and they normally come back within 18 months. And when people ask me, when I had one client who lost one of his cats. She died, and he more or less had a nervous breakdown. His cats were everything to him, and I got the cat coming back in the opposite sex. She had been a she-cat. It was going to be a tomcat, but the same markings, a lot of white with some black patches. And I was told 18 months, and that's quite a common time lag before a pet comes back to you. It can be sooner, and it can be longer, and it sometimes depends if you've got a space. They'll come back when you're going to be able to have them in your home again. And the same with horses, which can often be more difficult because horses are so expensive to keep. If a person's situation changes where they could keep horses, they can no longer keep horses. The horse will still come back if it gets an opportunity to be close to you. But they always do come back. And as I say, it's not normally all that long. So for my client who lost his beloved kitty, and he had two, and this one was his very favorite, the kitten was a stray, a feral kitten, or lost kitten, and in a supermarket near where he lived, some cat rescue people he knew found this little kitten. And I said, well, that will be Gracie, that will be her. And the kitten came to him and, is now a tom kitten. And that did heal the loss of Gracie. So with these very small pets that are much easier to keep as well, there's no need for that grief. And it's a shame, just as it's a shame when people don't understand that we live on. And the grief when you lose a loved one is real, and it doesn't matter what you know about past lives and future lives and the other side of the veil. The grief can be very real. There are some people who handle it with equanimity because they're so connected in a universal way that they don't see it as death at all. If the person going through that process has a great deal of understanding, it's a much easier process for them to go through. And people in those situations, they often have a much stronger or clearer idea of where they will meet again, when they will meet again. Things are changing. So, death is going to go out of fashion again, which it always does eventually on any planet where there's death. And funnily enough, I've seen people who've lost, say, a husband or a brother or father, and I see this person coming back to them on Earth as a baby, but sometimes I haven't seen the baby being born. That tells me it's like a few years in the future. I've actually seen visions of people like walking along a beach and they see a baby and they just go, oh, that's my baby. It's strange, but it happens. Things are going to change in that respect. So the biological reproduction will be phased out. And I did a reading earlier today where it was about, what was involved was a moment of ascension, in a sense. Not everyone is ascending beyond death at the same moment, but staying on the earth. In most cases, they stay on the earth, but that there will be a parting of the ways, and over a short period of time, the people who inherit the earth, the ones who've done the work, the ones who are coming from the heart, the star seeds and so on, over a short period of time, they would sort of get the very last fraction of their light body come in, and they're just like, oh, I've done it, I'm ascended, I'm arrived, I'm, totally in bliss. Now, a lot of people are extremely close to that, but they're not doing it because they would bring in so much light that there's still a little window of time for people who are lagging behind to wake up and go, yeah, I want to ascend too, I want to go beyond death. It's closing rapidly. But that is the parting of the ways, and a lot of things will happen after that. And again, you can't put a time on it, but I feel, I'm hearing things like a few short years, could be 2 or 3 years, could be 4 or 5 years. Fortunately, time is going faster. So back to reincarnation. We are at the end of a reincarnation cycle. Many of us have been coming to this planet since the very beginning of the spirit incarnating on the earth in human bodies or humanoid bodies, because if you were there in the land of Pangea, when all the land was one land mass, that was fairyland, so you would have been like an elf or a fairy, a pixie, some kind of nature spirit. You would have lived a very long time, and then traveled interdimensionally, and then in most cases come back, and going through the whole cycle of life on Earth with the continents splitting up, the continental drift, the land of Pan, that was all the land on planet Earth, then Lemuria, and then on the other side of the planet, in where the Atlantic is, you would have Atlantis, and there were other civilizations all around the globe. But Lemuria and Atlantis were the great civilizations. Lemuria was the feminine energy continent, and there are a few South Sea islands that are the tops of mountains, Hawaii being one, and Bimini, you can see roads that were in Atlantis, on the coast of Florida. If you look into the water, you can see roads. There are still roads made of rocks that you can see, sort of square blocks of stone. And the Canary Islands were part of Atlantis. So when I see photographs of those places or video, I start to kind of hallucinate a bit because I lived in those cultures, and they're very different than each other. And it's definitely easier to remember Atlantis because we had more memory. It was a slightly later culture. The people in Lemuria had very little memory. They were very much in the present. They were very female energy beings, and it's actually harder to remember a reality where you didn't have much memory. And the same with the land of Pan. It's much harder to remember being a nature spirit, although I do see people who are very obviously nature spirits, and there is crossover from that world to this world. You know, there are souls who are not usually human but sometimes take a human body. They're usually a fairy, something like that. My feeling about Pele and the volcano, which is now on some kind of apparently endless eruption, is because this is the female energy continent of Lemuria. A piece of what's left of it. There's not much. There are other islands that, in that hemisphere of the world that are also the tops of mountains that were in Lemuria. But I feel that this is to do with, more than anything, the abuse of the feminine that's going on, and I do feel that there's a bit of a backlash against female empowerment at the moment. It's not going to work, and it's happening. It's happening more in certain rather frenzied cultures, more so than in the more advanced Western nations. But it's happening here in America too. There's a backlash. And I do feel that the planet is in a lot of pain from the treatment of the animals and the treatment of the divine feminine and the treatment of females. And at the moment, those things are actually tending to get worse. I do also see that as very temporary. But as I look at that volcano, I think it's called Kilauea, I see a lot of pain coming out of the earth. I see a lot of like not being able to hold back. This is a very serious eruption. It wasn't expected to go on for anything like this long, and no one can figure out if it's going to stop or when it's going to stop. And there could be actually a very big blowout. Because apparently there are cracks appearing in the top of the volcano. So my feeling, what I see is it's very emotional. And we've been told for many years that the planet has got to clear and throw off this pain. And many of us have been carrying this pain from the planet and clearing it through our own bodies, through our own illnesses. Even some people have chosen to die that way, to carry a lot of pain off the planet. It seems to have to be cleared through someone for the most part. But this is what I see. It's like a gaping wound. So there's also been very bad treatment of the Hawaiian native people. So the pain has to be cleared, just as here in North America, the pain of, killing all the buffalo is still being cleared. It hasn't been cleared. Not enough people have really felt what happened. A lot of turbulence can be coming. However, the vast majority of us are going to be safe, and if anyone chooses to go in some kind of natural event, it is actually their choice. From a soul level, if we knew what our higher self was thinking and feeling, it would simplify things very much in most ways, because the things that don't seem to be going right in our lives, the lack of a partner, I really want to be with my twin flame, or certain things, you would see, oh, I'm still choosing this. But as this sort of pod in a small human body walking around on the surface of the planet with quite a limited view of everything, sometimes a person can feel victimized by lacks of things in their life. And yet the higher, from a higher self perspective, you are more your higher self is more who you truly are. The you in this physical body tends to be smaller than your soul, because your soul is very big and it's hard to fit all of it into a human body. It can be done if the body is wired up the right way. But, you in your higher self, which is the part of your soul that you can access quite easily, is always in God consciousness. So you're saying, well, he won't be able to get this, this, and this. He'll have these things that he needs, but he won't be able to have this, this, and this, because I want him to wake up to his spiritual truth. And I'm actually thinking of a specific person now, who I, first met sort of over 40 years ago. And, we were kind of hippies, we were art students. We were the hallucinogen generation. In the early 70s, I met this person. He's a really wonderful man. He's been a very successful actor and performer, successful in several areas, quite well known. And at the same time, there are certain things he just doesn't have. And I recently found out, this person does not believe in reincarnation. He's actually, I think he's kind of an atheist, actually. I haven't talked with him about it, but he posts things on Facebook. And I feel that his higher self, he doesn't have a partner. He would be a very good partner. He's got his cats. Obviously, like me, he's getting on a bit. I think he's 2 years younger than me. He has a place to live, and he has many friends and interesting activities, and he's still incredibly intelligent and gifted. He does art, but he finds money difficult to get enough money, which, most creative people do, really. It's not, I'm not saying it's necessarily all karma. It's a very difficult world for the artist. And where a few become very successful and make good money, there are more who struggle. Anyway, so there's struggle there, and he doesn't have a partner, which, he would make a very good partner. He, has had partners, obviously. I do feel that the higher self is saying, kind of pushing him to go deeper into his own psyche and into his own soul memories. The reason why people are atheists, and especially sort of highly evolved people who I would call very spiritually aware, actually, very, very aware, it's interesting. I heard another reading recently where a reading was done for somebody who's an atheist, and he was shown that he had a life where he felt so badly betrayed by God. He was in so much pain that he shut out. Another interesting case was the writer Gore Vidal, who was an atheist. He was a very, very brilliant man. I really enjoyed his work and his personality. It was a lot of fun. I saw that he had seen the devastation, on this planet, probably on others, and the suffering, and just decided, actually, before he came to Earth, I think, that God didn't care. In fact, I think it happened early on in his development. Many people have felt betrayed by God. And he, decided that if God didn't care to take good care of everyone, then he wasn't going to care about God. And eventually that hardens into atheism, because the person loses their connection with God. And because I come from a family where there were quite a few atheists, it's always been quite intriguing to me, because they were very good people. They were very heart-centered people, and very generous, and highly principled, ethical, had a lot of integrity. And it's strange to me, in a way. And the other thing that's strange about godlessness is every time someone trips over a curbstone, they go, oh my God. So it's totally obvious to me that everyone believes in God. Everyone knows God exists. When the stuff hits the fan, everyone says the same thing. Oh my God. the reason for that, is because they know that God exists. So that's when people reach out, when they lose it, when they lose their grip in some way. But back to reincarnation, let me see. I do medical mediumship. I used to be a naturopath, and I've always been interested in medicine. I find where people have a recurring problem, like some people have like arthritis in their neck or shoulder or lower back pain. I never see anyone with these symptoms in the body which are recurring or chronic, where they weren't much worse injured in another life. So people who get a lot of arthritis in their necks have usually been hanged a few times, and there's stuck energy in the neck. They haven't cleared the trauma. So it comes in as a weakness. They're not sending enough life force into that part of the body, and calcium deposits build up. Lower back, sometimes people have been sort of beaten on the lower back with large sticks and so on. You can go all around the body, but the areas in the body that have problems, it's not the first life they had a problem. And where, there are treatments for all these physical ailments. Some work, some don't. Some work for some people, some work for other people. Many of them just have to be alternative and nutritional. One aspect of releasing the problem from the body is seeing where it comes from. So you can often trace that back through a lot of lives. It won't be, I don't think it's present in every life, but it'll be present in many lives, and often the injuries are much worse when you go back to the original cause. Again, with death, the first time a person experienced death on the planet, all the future deaths are predicated on that. So there's something of that experience in the death the person has later. There has to be a first time. The first time was very traumatic because up to that point the body had lived for thousands of years, in the same body. And the being did not know what was happening. People are what I call imprinted by these experiences, and we carry the imprints of experiences from life to life. We don't seem to carry the imprints of happy experiences so much. I mean, when we're happy, you recognize it. When you're with people you've been happy with in other lives and you're having a good time, it feels very familiar and comfortable, but you're not imprinted. It's trauma that imprints you. It's displaced energy that gets stuck in the body, and that's called an imprinting because you carry it around with you until you release it and heal the trauma or whatever it is. So the main thing I guess I'd like to say about past lives, because it's the focus I always have, is how much you can heal the present by healing the past. And yes, will you get more lives? Well, yes and no. If you are ascending, which probably most of you listening are ascending and are going to ascend and inherit the earth, those that come from the heart, they're the meek that inherit the earth because they don't live to control other people or exploit other people by controlling them or anything like that. You could say that you would get another life in this life, unless you're about to leave the body and come back in a new body to earth later on, which most people who leave the earth will do. You will get another life in this life because you'll be reborn. Then you get other lives in the sense of, returning to your ascended master origins, maybe traveling around the universe in a spaceship. You may choose to incarnate on other planets and go through birth and death, but if you've done it here, it's probably been so intense that you don't want to do it again. I certainly don't want to do it again. I'm done with it. So other lives, yes, you will shift dimensions, and I guess you could call that another life. People vary. You may want to have the experience of having certain people as parents and being a baby and a child. So you will always have the opportunity to do those things that you want to do. Again, I think personally I'll give it a miss. So will you have future lives? Well, your loved ones, if you've lost anyone close to you, babies are still being born here. People are still coming into the planet. Again, in a few years, and I don't know how long, that door will close. I mean, there will be people coming here as very young people and babies, but it may not be by biological birth, just as star seeds want and ascended beings want the experience of parenting, or they're open to bringing up a child, someone that is from their soul group, or, someone that's very close to them on a soul level. That being will come in, and they may come in not as a newborn. They may be slightly older. They may grow up very fast, but there will still be opportunities for family life, and it will be chosen. The way it happens will be chosen by the people involved. So just like when babies come in now, you have already agreed to be that child's mother or father. That child has already chosen you to be parents. And then the memory usually goes when the being is born and comes into the earth life. You will always choose. It's always a choice. In situations where women are forced to have children and they don't, if it's a child they don't want, it's not necessarily a choice. It can be a very insane kind of spirit trying to get into the planet any way it can. And through a woman that doesn't want it there. A loving spirit will not come through a woman who truly doesn't want that child. So then you get the domineering, warlike, or psychopath type of souls, beings that come in. And they come in through that kind of situation. So they're not wanted, but they don't care. They just have an agenda. And it's an agenda to do harm here. And that's how they get here. So that's a very dark side of things. But I find that people don't ask how these things happen or why they happen and what they're about. And personally, I'm very interested. It's like, how do psychopaths exist? What is a psychopath, sociopath, whatever? How come they are? God didn't surely, create all these loving souls that have joy in existence and then I'll just make a certain percentage of them cruel and sadistic. That's not really what happened. It's something else. It wasn't intended. They're not intended, but they exist and they also reincarnate, which is, I'm basically against the death penalty. And, in certain cases I wouldn't, feel particularly upset about it. But, there are certain things which I don't find particularly forgivable, but they just come back and carry on. Someone has killed, they'll come back in another body and kill again. So that's one of the reasons. I'm against it for quite a number of reasons. And America is the only, advanced Western country that still has it. It was ended a long time ago in Europe and so on. But be that as it may, I'm interested in kind of understanding everything. But I find that I don't know if I meet people who are interested in understanding everything, or if I'm the only one, because I'm not really limited. I'm interested in politics on a certain level. What's being worked out, who's there, where they come from. I'm not interested in most of the personalities involved, but what's being played out. I want to know how it works. I want to know how the psyche works. I want to know how the emotions work. I want to understand the way that things play out in so many areas. So I can't say I'm interested in everything. I mean, I wouldn't really be fascinated by accounting or mechanics or international diplomacy beyond a sort of very basic knowledge. But I'm interested in what's at the heart of everything, what's at the core of everything. And I do meet people and I do work with people who are also, but I don't know if they have this sort of fervent passion to get to the bottom of every single puzzling, confusing, perplexing, or upsetting thing. And the effect is it makes me very useful for people on their path, because obviously if you're like that your whole life, which I have been, you do get insights and you do get tools, especially since I've done a lot of therapy and I've trained as a naturopath and studied nutrition for about 50 years and, studied quite a lot of medical information. You get tools that you're very helpful to people with these tools. But in terms of socially, you just have to be careful to figure out where people's sort of boundaries are. What they like to discuss. And a lot of people just like to be on a fairly humdrum level, occasionally go into the philosophical, love to talk about their pets, might like to talk about their children, experiences they've had, but they don't want to know why. So I don't know if it's correct wanting to know why, but it's very useful when people have problems that can't be resolved. When you get people who've gone to psychiatrists, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists for 20 years, and they've still got some terrible problem, no one's been able to get rid of it. And you can find out the cause, and you can remove the cause. Sometimes they need to do more things to remove the cause, as well as just finding out about it. Finding out about it is the first step. It's very, very useful in those kind of situations. It's not so needed by the person whose life is not very difficult. So I often work with people with quite serious things. But they're not, there's nothing wrong with their soul. On a soul level, they're fine. But, where someone keeps hitting a roadblock, the answer is to research the roadblock. What is it in the person they keep coming up against a brick wall or a roadblock, or they have some illness, or they have some physical symptom. You have to sometimes be prepared to do anything it takes. And I'm prepared to do that. If I have a vocation, if I have a career, I take it very seriously indeed. I go all the way. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I've had some very difficult lives. I've had some very difficult deaths, and numerous times of being burned at the stake and so on. And I think that I have a very strong feeling about ending suffering. I think other people have, people have other answers. It depends on the kind of suffering. It depends on the people. Sometimes it's spiritual or emotional, and there are spiritual teachers who are very, very good at some of those things. Well, what I'm very good at is identifying the cause. But as I say, it always goes back. Sometimes it goes back even as far as the Godhead, when the spirit was much younger and they lived in the Godhead. The person who's been trouble has usually been trouble all the way through. So I do find people who've had enemies that go, I'm not even going to say the number of years. If you can't really tell the number of years, but you're talking about the age of a soul, and I'm working with the older soul, or the very old soul. And, but very often you see someone that saw them and they were jealous because this person had such beautiful energy, and even in the beginning, in the creation, in the Godhead, there were fragmented souls, there were denial spirits, there was fragmentation. Not everyone was complete. So the ones that were complete, often somebody was jealous of them there. And that person may have been doing them a lot of harm throughout history. They'd show up on the planet because the ties between the victimizer and the victim, there's kind of a lot of cording there. And so the person who's been victimized might come to the planet a long time ago, and sooner or later their enemy will find them because the energy between them hasn't been cleared and healed. So we bring our own enemies with us, and very often the more light somebody has, the more badly they've been treated, and the more, the enemy. There's jealousy. There's no jealousy like the jealousy of someone who's closer to God than you are, and there's no jealousy like the jealousy of somebody who doesn't have a soul for somebody who does. Somebody who's naturally really gifted and has great gifts and powers, and somebody who is faking it, but they some people really want to fake being godly and being close to God. So you get a lot of tension on the spiritual path with those kind of people. And I work occasionally with someone where it's all lovely and they're very happy, and they're very often the person that only ever shows up once or once every few years because their life runs rather smoothly and they're very happy. Most of the people, have quite tricky things to negotiate, and it happens a lot faster when you get this strong input from the higher self. But it always involves, if I do one session with a person, it might be just a life reading about their life now and what to do about this problem and that problem, and then some, maybe something about one of their children, a look into the future. And I like to give them something, very positive, because all these positive people do have positive futures at this point in time, or there's a great deal of positive that can be revealed. If somebody wants to do that work, they come back, and then there is a lot of going into the past lives, but I wouldn't say that normally an entire session was going into reincarnation and past lives. They usually have something going on now that they need a reading on, they want a reading on. And then again, there's, more information about their future comes. And when somebody is working seriously on their path, whether it's with me or it's by other methods, I'm not for everybody. They're creating something very good for the future. The, starseed healers, people who basically want to help others, come from the heart and want the world to be a happier place than it is. All those people are healers, and they are creating a good future for themselves. Another aspect of reincarnation, it's interesting, when people are extremely adamant that reincarnation doesn't happen, like they actually get almost violent if the subject comes up, and they vehemently deny. My take on that is that they've actually done some really bad stuff in other lives. And, what I found is that people have guilty consciences. Certainly some have showed up in my life. If they've done something terrible to me in another life, I might be very good friends with them because often there's a karmic connection. It feels very loving, they feel like a friend. But as you get to know them, the stuff that's really between you, that has been buried, starts coming to the surface. I normally find that, or I've often found, that before it will get to the surface, that person does some kind of a number on me. They don't want me to remember, so they push me away. And it's not that they consciously remember, they're in denial. 95% of the time at least, probably more than that. But they actually suddenly, from being very nice, they'll really turn against you. And it's very often the point where I remember what they did, that they're fighting the memory down because they don't want the karma. They don't want to face it. And there is karma. If you have killed someone, if you have caused great suffering to them, if you've done that to more than one person, or, been abusive in various ways, you will have to experience what you caused before you can move on. So, people with bad karma, they sometimes even just get frightened just the first time they meet you. It can happen. Or, because I'm someone that reads the Akashic records and I can see people's past lives at the drop of a hat, they, if they meet someone who can do that, they're scared. They don't know why. You have a lot of light. They have a lot of stuff they're suppressing. The light, basically it bombards them because it's a lot more light than they have themselves. And it starts to move energy, and it starts to move memories. It starts to move a lot of stuff that person is sitting on. Now, this is why the greatest light beings on earth have been persecuted. Because one of the reasons they want, they'd rather kill that person than face the truth about themselves. So that's at the core of that, those tragic experiences more than anything. And of course, every time that occurs in the next life or the next life, it's going to come back stronger than ever. And what's actually happening on the planet now, I'm going to finish in a minute, but what's actually happening on the planet now is that, there is a sort of core of people in Team Dark, or instigators in Team Dark, who've done so much stuff that they, if they don't keep doing it, they're going to die, and they're going to actually start paying for it. And that's why they're hanging on and doing all the bad things they can think of, to do. So they're still pulling bad things out of their sleeve. They've been messing with the timelines. I have a feeling they can't mess with the timeline as much now. They're losing that ability. They have technology to do all those things. And they've done so much stuff that if they stop, they're going to start remembering what they've done. So they keep doing it. And for many of them, at this point, it's only by exploiting others, the labor of others. They're getting money out of people by foul means and not by fair means. And they often become very addicted to the money, extremely greedy about the money. And they're kind of in a frenzy at this point, the core of people who are doing that. They can't stop. In fact, some of them are about to be stopped. They can't stop because if they stop, it will all come back on them. Plus, they no longer know any way to get energy except by stealing it. They've been doing it for too long. So they actually have to keep doing evil in order to stay alive. And it's an existence. I mean, they are not what I call alive, those people, for the most part. I'm not saying they don't get their payoff and they can't have their happy moments or anything like that, but they're not what I call truly human and truly alive. But when they stop, or as is going to happen, they get stopped, they will start to face their comeuppance. And then there are other people who've been made to do harm, and sometimes it's been going on for a long time. They may have had implants or programs. They've been controlled by Satanists and so on, and done very bad things, but they've been programmed. Now, they may get some karma, but because they were programmed, underneath that is an innocent soul. And in some cases, they do die, and they get a new body, and they're coming in as babies that have no karma. They've got their healing in the astral plane because it wasn't their fault. You can't, if you take a child and program that child and train it to do really bad things, when the child realizes, they may go through a process of feeling very bad about what they've done. But quite soon, I see it being taken off them because they're not responsible. It's those that are completely heartless and that have been instigators. And you can't trace it back to their childhood. It's no good saying, oh, this person's a psychopath, but his daddy didn't love him, or that's nothing to do with it. They've been like that for a very long time. And yes, they come into families of other people who are similar, and there isn't much love, but they're not, doing terrible things because their childhood was rather cold. Or even somewhat abusive. That's not why they're doing those things. I've known many, many good people who've been abused as children, and they don't abuse others. I'm not saying they don't have issues, but they don't abuse. It's very different. So I hope that's told you something that was useful to you about reincarnation and karma and issues. It's very much my approach. It's maybe not so much of a beginner's approach. I'm not really talking to people who are trying to find out if reincarnation is a fact. For the most part, the people I would be talking to would be people who know it. In many cases, they remember some of the events in other lives. But whether they do or not, they feel very strongly that it's a reality. And very often, my people who would listen to this have had readings and been told about various past lives, and they probably do resonate with them very strongly. So it's more to maybe go into it a little bit deeper. If you would like a past life reading or a medical reading or any other kind of reading, such as a general whole life reading, do please contact me. I will post my email address under the video, and if you liked this, like would be great, and subscribing would be fantastic, because it's only as you get more subscribers that the videos start to show up. They will show up the new videos will show up in your feed if you subscribe. If you like this approach, that's a very good thing to do. Subscribing to my channel helps my videos to become more visible, and that would be fantastic, and I'd be really appreciative. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope we will connect again, and God bless you.